Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Almost every day, you see a story about a data breach, and that's your sensitive information, somebody getting it, holding it for ransom. It happens quite frequently. Last time we got together with him, I've heard of these stories and situations. I had no idea what was involved and what some of these major companies, even healthcare companies, are paying to get their data back, which is ours, by the way. Um, so we're going to talk today about making sure things are secure in your world. And we're going to attack it from two ways, the personal side and the business side. His company does take care of many businesses, especially healthcare organizations. They've been doing it for more than 2 decades and deeply committed to empowering businesses and organizations to make sure that their material is safe. Business Automation Experts is his company. Matt Lepkowski is our Diamond of the Decade. He's back with us. Hey, Matt, how you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Lots to learn here, I'm sure. And it goes deeper than, making sure well, maybe we should just start with your password. I don't know. You tell me. What do you think?
I would start a little bit broader than that.
Sure.
It's not necessarily a fun thing, but I think the first thing to do is just decide to be informed, right? Instead of, that doesn't sound like it's of interest. Actually, maybe listen, and then if you hear, oh, wait a minute, my bank is Bank of America. I probably should look at this, right? Now, the Change Healthcare that we kind of talked about before, that one's like nebulous. Like, how are you going to know that they're so important to a supply chain that, like, oh my gosh, they had my stuff. How are you going to know that? You're not, right? But at least just kind of hear that if there's something of interest. And on the healthcare front, actually, the government is a little bit helpful on that. So it's the OCR, the Office of something, they're the police force of Health and Human Services. They're the FBI, and they're the guys that do the arresting. Like if you breached data, like they come knocking on your door, like, hey, you got a problem here. They actually have a website. It's a OCR. Let me look at it. OCRportal.hhs.gov.
Wow.
Health and Human Services, HHS. And so that's the wall of shame. And you can kind of get a sense, they actually give you the state, so you can look in there like, oh, I'm in New York. Who messed up? And it's updated like every 24 hours. So it's pretty current. I wouldn't spend your day kind of nosing through that thing. It's just listen to the news ones because the big ones you definitely get to hear about. But then this website is actually like if you have more than 1,000 records, you have to go federal. And then actually, if it's over 1,000, the current rule is you got to go to a media company. And so a lot of people spend a lot of time like, oh, 999 records, like, whoo, I don't have to go talk to, the New York Times or somebody because like it's an actual federal requirement that you have to post. Yeah, that's me. I screwed up.
Wow.
So
interesting.
And the states have rules too. That's actually over 500 records. So,
so maybe a digression, but I'm curious. Would media companies look at the wall of shame to see what's going on? Maybe a company, Ticketmaster had a breach recently. We talked about that. Pick any company. And maybe they don't want a lot of people to know, but it has to be documented somewhere. Do you think that media companies or the press kind of scroll down and say, oh, look at this one. Oh, and now it becomes a story?
Yeah, so there is a cybercrime magazine that I sometimes look at, and they stay pretty up on things. Apparently, there's certain. So if you had a breach, so the OCR thing is specific to healthcare, right? We've had 30 years of HIPAA, and so there's things that are kind of defined in that. So on the medical side, there's a lot, right? On the Ticketmaster, like all these other companies, they don't necessarily have the same laws that they have to abide by. And so we're seeing a lot of potential law changes and things are kind of adjusting in terms of what's going on for a company. So like there's a lot more kind of risk that people are aware of and maybe not aware of, and then trying to deal with. And, it's never really a fun topic. I get that. But usually what we try to do is say, well, here's some things that you can kind of do that are easy. And then for some things, like on the company side, we would try to say, link things together, like automate communication in these things. So that way you can see something very fast, right? Because the whole point is find out about the problem before, it gets worse, right? So if you had a cold, you would
Mhm.
kind of monitor, "Oh, I don't feel great, and then if
Yep.
it gets a little bit worse, like, hey, you better go see a doctor.
Right.
You don't want to go to the doctor. So see what you can catch when it's just, I don't feel the best. And you need to be able to kind of do that at a company level. And then on a personal level, it's kind of the same thing. Just at least pay attention. Yeah, this stuff stinks. And in light of the fact that, companies are going to drop the ball, there's some things that you probably should start to do or just think mentally about. Um, Number one is going to be like the password stuff, and you'd want to have some system, not necessarily a product. I know people like LastPass, but that's been hacked like 4 times. So I don't really recommend that one. So if you're going to pick a system, like,
I use it.
yeah,
And I'm
it's
aware of the breaches. I get it. Um, I wanted to believe that they're taking the measures to lock it down even more. But I was, I'm already entrenched. I'm using it. It's convenient, et cetera,
right,
et
right.
cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, be aware of what's there. And, if you're looking at a system, just put it in and say breach, like Google it, LastPass breach, and then 2024 or something like just see if like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Yeah.
But you're going to
Hmm.
need some kind of system because the smarter thing to do is you got to, everything's a login and a password, right? It's like an email and a password or something.
Yep.
Try to have something unique. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but it should be long. So of that, you always heard of that, change your password every 90-day thing is, but do you know why it's 90 days? Yeah, it came from a government agency called NIST, National Institute of Standards, something T. Um, they set that like 2002, 2003, and the reason it was 90 days is the password lengths were 8, right? So they always said make it 8 characters minimum, right? And computers at that time could crack that password in 89 days. So they said just change it 4 times a year, right? So
Wow.
make it 8 characters. Well, computers are way faster. So 8 characters, like you can break that in, I don't know, 90 seconds. So what you need to do is go longer, right? If the system that you work with can take more characters, do it. And what you want to, if you like have to type the
Wow.
thing, if you can't use a LastPass, just kind of come up with a formula, right? So I like to say, like my favorite dog was Fido. And what did he do? He ate my stuff. So you could just say, like Fido chewed my work 24 minus or hyphen or like whatever.
Hmm.
Um, just come up with a kind of a formula. So it's easier for you to do. And then if it's long, it's going to take a long time for somebody to screw you. Um, and then potentially just look at your passwords and say, I actually, my bank password, it's 2 years old. Probably change that, right? Because when they break in, they grab stuff and then it goes into a dictionary. And so that's like the first thing they're going to try, right? So you had this complicated password and yeah, I don't want to change this again. Um, yeah, I would. If you're like 15, 20 characters, it's going to take most computers today and even foreseeable future about 30,000 years to actually brute force that. And so if they're actually spending that much time pounding a system, you know, it's
Hmm.
not going to happen, right? Like everything, if it's five, if you screw up 5 times, you're toast, right? So the brute force doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of situations, but if you gave them the answer and it's just in a file that's 2 years old, you're done. Yeah.
Wow.
So
thank you for all of this and that 90-day insight. And,
Mm.
many of us, and I get you on the formula to help you remember if you are physically typing it in, whereby piece of information, your formula could be pound exclamation point, maybe one of your kids' date of birth, year of birth, you know,
Well, something obscure,
yeah.
right? So you don't put in like your date of birth, right? Because like that's
Yeah,
always
I
been
meant your
that
kids.
one's always
Yeah.
yeah, no, but right, yeah, like maybe well even date of birth of your kids, like they kind of can figure that out. Um, but you could say like the date that you proposed to your wife or something like that. It's
Okay.
not really
Yeah.
going to be known.
Right.
Um, Fairly obscure or not your mother's maiden name. Don't do that. Like that one's definitely out there. But your great grandmother, your favorite grandmother's souffle or something. Just something that it's meaningful to you, but it
Right.
isn't something that you go around and take pictures of. And oh, look at this. So you can keep that. Uh, so like if you're a Jets fan or a Giants fan, and you like have that everywhere, and like you always wear green or blue or like whatever. Don't use Giants 2024. Giants are the best, or like that's gonna be a problem for you. Um,
What
but
about us? And just I'm curious here to see how this looks to you, but what
mm,
about with your formula? Because you want to have different characters in there. Pick a
you
year.
don't. It's just the length. Yes, there. All of the systems are going to say you got to do upper or lower, some kind of like they're going to force that on you, but you don't have to do all that randomness. But what you can do is like E, make it a 3, right? Like that's a common. O, make it a 0, and so um, like O and 0 really hard to figure out. Like if you just saw that, you wouldn't know exactly if it's an uppercase O or is it a 0. You'd have to look at that. Like, so if somebody saw that kind of a password, you know, if you have that kind of a process, um, that I think that works, and you can kind of like humans can see that and we know what to do, right? Like if I wrote out something with numbers, you can kind of decipher that. But
Hmm.
uh, some ways to think about it, but definitely have a process that works for you.
What about a sentence? So, for
Mhm.
example, you might use, I'm just throwing it out there, and not you, I would use it. Matt
Mhm.
knows everything about automation. Pound exclamation point, a year that means something, maybe, propose to your wife, whatever it is,
Mhm.
maybe a character to end that password. Now we're making longer is better. I guess that's where we're going here.
Yeah, and then if you had that passphrase, then you could kind of rearrange some of the words. So it kind of works for you, right? And then it creates some diversity, right? So um, you put the date at the beginning or you put the date in the middle.
Okay,
You just
fair
kind of
enough.
you could kind of play with those, but you know kind of what that mechanism is. And I'm only saying this for things like where you don't really want, like you're going to have to type it. So there's plenty of systems that I don't, so I don't have my password saved in a browser. I always have a system, right? And so then I'll copy and paste something into it. But sometimes I have to actually type it and I kind of have to know. I need to see what my bank balance is today. Um, like I'll have a process for that particular password. But if I'm, trying to log into some knitting website or something, like, just,
Hmm.
copy paste it. Maybe you save that password, but it doesn't really matter to you, right? So it goes to that process again of what's really important, what's really going to be a problem if this got in the wild. If somebody really can abuse me, what is that, right? And then deal with that a little more sophisticated. And then the other stuff, I don't care, right? Like, but the I don't care stuff cannot equal something that's super important, right? So like, use a different password. Don't save all the same passwords everywhere.
Hmm. Can
Super
you do
important.
this? Would this be okay? let's say you have your formula, and I love what you said. And I know we're like micro analyzing the,
Mm,
passwords, but it's so important. Um, you have your formula,
mm,
whatever it might be, you've come up with the data, whatever. If you go to one site and you use the sentence to try and make it longer, Matt knows everything about automation and, pound exclamation point a year, da da da. Now I'm on to another website, but
mm,
I want to be able to remember it. Would it be okay to now, to your point, take the date and put it at the beginning and
mm.
then the formula and end it with Matt knows everything about automation? So
Right.
the elements are the same, but you moved it around, but it's a totally different website. I'm only asking that because many say don't use the same password for every website. Duh, got it. But would that be reasonable?
Course.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it looks definitely different to the computer. But basically, not to go too deep into cryptography, but effectively it's based on large numbers, right? So when your passwords get longer, those numbers get really hard. And the way it works is prime numbers. So if you have a lot of prime numbers, very hard for a computer to figure out, right? Like it's a bazillion options and it's going to take forever to get the answer. So
Hmm.
that's why that works. Um, then there's like I always recommend to maybe not put passwords on your phone because phones are very attacked and they are not the best. They're not the most secure things. I know like Apple says, well, we're so secure. There's so many ways because it doesn't necessarily like on your desktop, right? Like if you go to install a program, it pops up. It's like, hey, you want to install this, right? And if that popped up on your computer, you weren't planning on installing something, the answer is no.
Hmm.
Um, but on your phone, it doesn't really do that, right? So if you click the link, stuff happens, and
Wow.
that's not good. And if all your eggs are in that basket, like that's gonna hurt you. Um,
I want to, while we're here at this juncture,
mm,
what about when Google asks you if you wanted to save the password?
right,
Safe, not safe?
fairly safe.
Hmm.
But like I said, do not risk. Don't save your bank password into Google, right? Like,
Yeah.
certain like think about. I don't care about this website, CNBC. Save it. Right? Like, what's my risk? Like, what's this potentially going to impact? How is that going to hurt me? And then, you know,
Gotcha.
it's a fairly easy way to think about it. Um, but yeah, I do see people that, phones are super convenient. I totally get it. Uh, the MFA thing, like everything that texts you or makes you just, yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, phones are the line of least defense. Like so if somebody really wants you, right? You already heard about how they were hacking Trump's phone and Harris's phone and other like the Chinese, somebody's going after your phone. And not that you're going to be on a list and you got to be super paranoid, but understand that that thing can hurt you. And so what they usually will do is try to get you to do something dumb on your phone. Then they can capture everything, right? So if you
Hmm.
woke up one day and like your bank just sent you a text and you didn't log in, call the bank, right? Like because somebody knows your password and they got your phone, right? So you're toast. Um, and
Wow.
you just know what the potential risks are. Now the MFA, very helpful. Like everybody's going to make you do it, but understand that the phone is still a problem. So yeah, it's a password and it's something that's unique to you. That's the idea of it. Unfortunately, the something unique to you is very hackable and creates a problem for you. So just
Now,
be
what
aware of
about
that.
this scenario? You you want to give somebody credit card information
Mhm.
and could be a family member. Let's say it's a client. So
Mm.
you don't want to email it.
No,
Is it reasonable to break it up within a text or an email? Like, for example,
right.
let's say the credit card number, but the security code, a credit card number in an email, the security
Sure.
code comes in a text.
Yeah,
Maybe it's another text with just the date, nothing else around it. Is that reasonably secure to share that information?
sure. Yeah, because it's that concept of like uh, you're dividing the password kind of thing. Like the whole point of SSL and other things is there's a public key, right? And then there's a private key. And like everybody knows the public key, but you need the private one to decrypt it. Like that's been how that stuff always works. And so if you think about things like that, like I'll give you 90% of the answer, but the 10% that's really important, I'm going to call you and tell you this or text it. Or sometimes what I do is I take a picture of something, right? And then I text the
Mm.
picture because that's brutal for somebody to really have to do because now they got to download the picture, then they got to try to run OCR, then they got to like make it painful. But for
Why
a
did
human,
Matt? Why didn't I ever think about that? It's
yeah,
uh, I obviously it's reasonable. If it popped to my head, I'd be right there. Yeah, of course, duh. But yeah, so you could just send a photo. And now credit cards, many of them have the security code, expiration, and also the credit card number on the back. You don't even have to send two photos. Wow.
yeah, right,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
It didn't even think about that. All right. Would it be safe to email that?
the picture,
Yeah.
um, not necessarily.
Okay.
Uh, that's like if so, it's nice to kind of type something out because somebody can copy it, right? Like highlight, copy,
Right.
and then then you give them the other answer, and if they don't have to type like the 3-digit thing or the zip code. All you have to tell them the zip code. You just say like, it's my home zip code, right? So you'd have to know where I live, but if I know you and you trust, like all right, oh yeah, Matt lives there, so that's his zip code.
Hmm.
Um, and if I guess you were really crazy paranoid, you could put go to UPS or post office or whatever, and that's where you send some stuff. So then that's a zip code. But I make those type of recommendations to people in businesses, not to individuals.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. Learning a lot today. Let's with the moment that we have left, and next time we get together, we'd love to look at these security measures and reminders on the business side. We were talking more about individuals here.
Mhm.
Now, your company can help companies, especially healthcare organizations, automate what they do, but also tighten their security measures, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we try to. Unfortunately, there's a lot of tools in cybersecurity, right? So there isn't really platforms. Now we work with stuff that's more of a platform. Well, that's where I see a lot of value because a lot of people kind of like, I buy my password manager and then I got to buy another thing. And like you got 50 things that you're paying for. You don't need to do that. Like consider that risk because complexity equals risk. The last thing I'd say on an individual, just assume your social security number's out there, so freeze your credit, right? Like it's a little bit painful, but they all websites, it's always free. You can unfreeze it for free. That's federal. Just know the main ones, Experian, TransUnion, what's it, Equifax, and then I think there's one other. But just like look those up, freeze it,
Yep.
and just only if you need it, unfreeze it.
I
But
did. That's that. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. And peace of mind. And it's also when somebody checks into your credit, it can take your credit down. So I don't want to risk that. So it's like I open the faucet up when I need that and then close the faucet up as needed. Matt, just great information, vital in today's world. I think many of us minimize the risk that is here, but it's happening all the time, and there's so much at stake. So appreciate all the insight. What's the best way to reach you? What's your website?
businessautomationexperts.com. So yeah, Google
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But you can type it. It definitely works. Or the short one's bae-llc.com.
Gotcha. Yeah, if you're looking to lock it down within your company, and especially healthcare, whole different category with HIPAA and such,
Mm.
reach out to Matt, start that conversation. Thank you for being here. Looking forward next time we get together.
Great. Thanks for the time,
Appreciate it.
Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.